The vast chamber of the Galactic Council gleamed with polished obsidian, its towering pillars carved with the histories of empires that had risen and fallen long before humanity had discovered fire. Representatives of 100 species filled the amphitheater, their voices a discordant murmur of clicks, growls, and chimes. In the center, upon the high dais, sat Chancellor Verkoth of the Vrake Dominion, his serpentine frame coiled in irritation as he tapped a taloned finger against the armrest of his throne. His deep violet eyes narrowed as he addressed the assembly. "The matter of humanity lingers still," Verkoth announced, his voice slithering through the air like oil on water. "Must we continue this farce?" The council was formed to unite the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. Yet we entertain the notion that a fledgling species, one barely stepping beyond its own moon, deserves a seat among us. A ripple of agreement spread through the assembly. The Kreln, massive insectoids with iridescent carapaces, chittered disdainfully. The Oral, feathered scholars whose kind had recorded the rise and fall of thousands of species, rustled their wings in quiet derision. Even the usually impassive Drekhan warlords, whose kind had burned 100 worlds to ash, rumbled their discontent. At the speaker's podium, Ambassador Elias Graham of Earth stood alone, his expression impassive. A man of late middle age, his sharp blue eyes surveyed the chamber with a patience honed over decades of diplomatic warfare. He was no fool. He knew exactly how the council viewed humanity. Weak, small, temporary, a race of fragile things whose lifespans burned out before they could even begin to matter. "Humanity has earned its place," Elias said, his voice even. "We have brokered peace among warring nations, built alliances, and adapted to every challenge presented to us. The Council has always valued resilience and ingenuity. Do we not embody those very traits?" Verkoth scoffed, uncoiling slightly. "Resilience? Ingenuity? You mistake recklessness for courage and desperation for strength. Your kind does not understand true war. You do not endure generations of conquest, nor have you survived wars that last millennia. A single solar cycle can wipe out your entire civilization." The chamber rumbled with agreement. Elias held his ground. "And yet, we are still here. The galaxy is filled with species that have endured for eons. But endurance is not the only measure of strength. Sometimes, strength lies in adaptation, in refusing to be broken." A new voice interjected, smooth and guttural. "Bold words, for a species that has never bled on the stars." The speaker was General Cortal of the Groundnox, a towering brute clad in ceremonial battle armor that bore the scars of 100 campaigns. His people, a race of war-hardened titans, had carved their place in the galaxy through sheer force. He stood, addressing the council with the ease of one who had crushed opposition beneath his boot for centuries. "Strength is measured on the battlefield, not in words," Cortal said. "The Groundnox do not recognize politicians as warriors, and warriors rule the galaxy, not diplomats." Elias studied the warlord carefully. This was no mindless brute. Cortal was a tactician, and his words were a calculated strike. The Groundnox were feared not for their size or their brutality, but because they understood power better than anyone else in the council. And they saw no power in humanity. "What do you propose, then?" Elias asked. Cortal smiled, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "A test. One warrior, one battle. No fleets, no armies, no tricks. One of your kind against one of ours. A duel of honor. If humanity survives, you may claim your place among us. If not," he spread his massive arms, "then the council shall have its answer." Silence followed. Then, murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. The challenge was fair by their standards, brutal, but fair. The Kreln clacked their mandibles in amusement. The Drekhan warlords exchanged approving nods. Even the usually reserved Oral tilted their heads in curiosity. Elias felt the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on him. He could refuse, of course. Humanity was not yet a true military power. They had their fleets, their weapons, but compared to the ancients of the council, they were little more than children with slingshots. He could walk away, let Earth remain a vassal species, safe but disregarded, or he could wager everything. He lifted his chin. We accept. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices. Some laughed, some cheered, others whispered, already writing humanity's obituary. The Groundnoks grinned, their brutal minds relishing the coming spectacle. Verkatha's lips curled in amusement. Very well, he said. Choose your champion. We shall see if humanity is worth more than the breath it wastes. Elias inclined his head, turned, and strode from the podium. His heart pounded, but his face remained unreadable. As he exited the chamber, his communicator buzzed. He lifted it to his ear. A calm voice greeted him. Do we have our orders? Elias exhaled slowly. Yes, send one of ours. The line went dead. Far from the polished halls of the Galactic Council, in the steel-lined depths of a covert Earth military installation, a lone figure rose from a training mat, his breath steady, his movements precise. The soldier reached for his gear without hesitation. Lieutenant Commander Jack Reynolds had just been called. Jack Reynolds sat on the edge of a reinforced bench, wrapping his hands in black combat tape with slow, practiced movements. The underground training facility hummed with the distant sounds of machinery and the rhythmic strikes of fists against padded dummies. Overhead, sterile white lights cast his lean, muscular frame in sharp relief. The scars along his forearms testaments to battles fought in places no one on Earth would ever hear about. He had been briefed an hour ago. A duel, one-on-one. The fate of humanity's place in the galaxy resting on whether he lived or died in a pit fight against an alien behemoth. Jack exhaled, rolling his shoulders. They had sent diplomats to the stars, politicians with silver tongues and empty promises. And now, when words had failed, they sent him a Navy SEAL. A steel door hissed open behind him. Heavy boots echoed on the floor, and he didn't need to turn to recognize the presence of Commander Sarah Klein. She had recruited him into Black Ops years ago, a handler as sharp as she was ruthless. You've seen the footage, she asked without preamble. Jack nodded. A holographic display had shown him his opponent. General Cortal of the Groundnoks, 9 feet of corded muscle, his reptilian hide thick as armor, his hands capable of tearing through titanium plating. The recordings of past duels weren't fights. They were executions. Tell me what you're thinking, Klein prompted. Jack tightened the wraps around his knuckles. He's slow, overconfident, trained for brute force engagements. He'll expect me to break the moment he makes contact. He flexes fingers. I won't. Klein studied him. Your orders are simple. Win. No honor, no rules. Whatever it takes. Jack smirked. Wouldn't have it any other way. She handed him a small tablet. Final clearance for your loadout. You're authorized for cybernetics, but nothing external. The Council wants a pure fight. Jack skimmed the list. Neurological enhancements were already integrated. Reaction boosters, muscle weave reinforcements, subdermal plating. No weapons. No armor. Just him against a monster. He pressed his thumbprint to confirm. Klein watched him for a long moment. Do you feel fear? Jack met her gaze. No, but I hope he does. 12 hours later, he was aboard the diplomatic shuttle, seated in a reinforced chair as the vessel tore through slip space toward Raktor Prime. The crew avoided his section of the ship, murmuring to each other in languages he didn't bother translating. He knew what they thought. The humans had lost their minds. They were sending a single man to die. Across from him, a Zalari diplomat, a pale-skinned being with elongated features, finally gathered the nerve to speak. You are their chosen warrior? Jack glanced up from his seat. Looks that way. The Zalari hesitated. You understand the Groundnoks champion has never been defeated? That his kind have fought since before your ancestors master fire. Jack leaned back, folding his arms. And The diplomat's expression was unreadable. You have no armor, no blade, no weapons. Jack tapped his temple. I am the weapon. The Zalari said nothing more. The shuttle exited slipspace, and Raktor Prime loomed ahead. A brutal world of jagged mountain ranges and blood-red skies. The surface was scarred with the remnants of endless battles. Trenches carved into blackened earth, the skeletal remains of war machines half buried in sand. This was not a world that knew peace. The docking bay was filled with towering Growlnox warriors, their bodies covered in ceremonial armor, their yellow eyes gleaming with amusement as Jack stepped onto the landing ramp. Their language was guttural, filled with snarls and growls, but he didn't need a translator to understand their meaning. They were laughing. A particularly massive Growlnox stepped forward, easily twice Jack's size, his scarred face twisted in a smirk. "This is the human champion," he rumbled. "Your species insults us." Jack met his gaze. "I get that a lot." The warrior's amusement flickered. He leaned down, lowering his voice. "Die quickly, little human. It is the only honor you will find here." Jack smiled. "We'll see." The warrior straightened, snorting before turning away. The crowd parted as General Cortal himself emerged. He moved with the confidence of a being who had never known defeat, his crimson battle-scarred armor draped across his massive shoulders like a trophy. His gaze swept over Jack, evaluating, measuring, before dismissing him outright. "You are not what I expected," Cortal said, voice like grinding stone. Jack tilted his head. "What were you expecting?" "A warrior," the alien said simply. "Not a child playing at war." Jack chuckled. "Funny. I was thinking the same thing about you." For the first time, the general's eyes darkened. The amusement in the air evaporated, replaced with something colder. Jack had seen it before. The look of a predator realizing it might have underestimated its prey. Cortal exhaled through his nostrils. "Tomorrow, human, you will know what it is to stand before death." Jack stepped closer, unflinching. "Tomorrow, you'll know what it's like to lose." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the gathered Growlnox warriors seemed uncertain, their laughter dying in their throats. Jack didn't wait for a response. He turned, following the diplomatic escort toward his quarters. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn what a seal could do. The arena was ancient, carved into the bedrock of Raktor Prime long before humanity had a name for the stars. Jagged stone walls loomed over the pit, the deep scars of past battles etched into the ground like tombstones of forgotten warriors. Thousands of Growlnox filled the Colosseum, their guttural chants reverberating through the air, a relentless drumbeat of anticipation. Above them, the Galactic Council watched from an elevated platform, their expressions ranging from curiosity to pity. Jack Reynolds stood at the center of the arena, rolling his shoulders as he surveyed the battlefield. There was no sand, no padding, just raw, uneven stone. His boots scraped against the surface as he adjusted his stance, feeling the subtle shifts in the terrain. He had fought in deserts, jungles, frozen wastelands, and zero gravity. This was just another battlefield. A massive gate groaned open across from him, and the chanting reached a fever pitch. General Cortal stepped into the arena, his towering frame casting a monstrous shadow. His dark crimson skin gleamed under the twin suns, every inch of him carved from raw muscle. His armor was minimal, little more than ceremonial shoulder guards and a belt of trophies, skulls of past challengers. In his hand, he carried a massive plasma-edged blade, the weapon humming with a low, hungry growl. Jack exhaled slowly. No armor, no weapons, just his hands, his training, and the years of brutal experience that had turned him into something more than human. Cortal stopped a few feet away, tilting his head. "You still have time to kneel, human. I will make it quick." Jack smirked. "You talk too much." The signal came without warning, a thunderous gong that shook the arena. Cortal moved instantly, closing the distance in a blur of muscle and speed, his blade carving through the air. Jack barely sidestepped, feeling the heat of the plasma edge as it sliced past his ribs. A lesser soldier would have hesitated. But Jack had already moved, pivoting into the blind spot of the Groundnox's swing. He struck 3 lightning-fast jabs to Cortal's side, targeting the exposed joints between muscle plates. The general grunted but barely flinched. Jack had expected that. The Groundnox were built like walking tanks, their bodies naturally armored, resistant to conventional strikes. But everything had limits. Cortal's counterattack was a backhanded strike that could have shattered bone. Jack ducked, rolling beneath the blow, his movements smooth, calculated. He came up behind the warlord, aiming a precise kick to the back of the knee. This time, Cortal stumbled. The crowd roared in surprise. A human making the Groundnox stagger? Impossible. Jack didn't give him time to recover. He surged forward, striking at pressure points, nerve clusters, weak spots most wouldn't think to target. His fists were a blur, landing blow after blow, each one designed to weaken, to exploit biological vulnerabilities. Cortal snarled, his patience snapping. He swung his blade in a reckless arc, sacrificing precision for sheer force. Jack leapt back, but the tip of the weapon grazed his side, searing through fabric and flesh. Pain flared, white-hot and immediate, but Jack grit his teeth and pushed forward. Pain was an old friend. Cortal saw the wound and grinned. "You bleed." Jack wiped his side with his fingers, looking at the crimson streak before shaking his head. "So, do you—" Cortal frowned. He looked down, across his ribs. Where Jack's fist had landed earlier, his skin was darkening, muscles trembling beneath the surface. Jack had been precise, not just hitting, but targeting nerve clusters designed to shut down movement. The realization came too late. Jack was already moving. He feinted left, drawing the warlord's attention, then dove low, sliding between Cortal's legs. As he passed beneath, he planted both hands against the ground and drove his heel up into the alien's exposed throat with every ounce of force his enhanced muscles could generate. The impact was brutal. Cortal staggered, choking, his blade clattering to the stone. Jack rose in an instant, seizing the moment. He wrapped his arm around the Groundnox's massive neck and drove his knee into the weakened joint at the base of the spine. Cortal roared, thrashing, but Jack held on, tightening his grip like a vice. The general's movements became sluggish, his breath ragged. For the first time in his life, Cortal felt fear. With a final, brutal twist, Jack wrenched the warlord's head to the side. There was a sickening crack. Silence fell over the arena. Cortal collapsed forward, his massive frame hitting the stone with a dull thud. His body twitched once, then stilled. Jack straightened, his breath steady despite the burning pain in his side. He looked up at the sea of alien faces staring in shock. Some were frozen in disbelief, others in horror. Even the Galactic Council members sat motionless, unable to process what had just happened. Jack reached down, grabbed Cortal's fallen blade, and drove it into the stone beside the warlord's body. Then he turned and met the gaze of the Groundnox warriors watching from the stands. "Next time," he said, voice carrying through the stunned arena, "send someone better." He walked away, leaving nothing but silence in his wake. The silence stretched across the arena like a funeral shroud. The crowd of Groundnox warriors, beings who had known only conquest and dominance, stood motionless, their disbelief palpable. Their champion, undefeated, unchallenged for decades, lay broken on the stone, his body twisted in death. And above them all, the Galactic Council remained frozen, their vast collective of species unable to process what had just occurred. Jack Reynolds didn't wait for ceremony. He walked toward the exit with the same measured stride he had used stepping into the pit, his side burning from the plasma wound, his muscles thrumming with exhaustion and adrenaline. He had fought in battles that never made the news, toppled regimes before they became threats, survived situations designed to erase men from existence. This was just another job. Chancellor Verkatha's voice cut through the heavy silence, his usual composure fractured. This is impossible. Jack stopped, turning slightly. The Vrake leader's violet eyes flickered between Jack and the corpse of General Cortal, his elongated fingers tightening around the armrest of his throne. He wasn't alone in his disbelief. The oral scholars muttered to one another, their feathers ruffling in agitation. The insectoid Krelm clicked their mandibles in what Jack guessed was the equivalent of nervous whispering. Even the war-hardened Drekhan warriors, whose species had once raised entire planets, sat unnaturally still. A human had just shattered the illusion of galactic supremacy. Elias Graham stood at the council's podium, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But Jack caught the slight flicker of satisfaction in the ambassador's eyes. This was exactly what Earth needed. One of the Drekhan finally leaned forward, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. The human fought with no armor, no weapon, and yet he stands, the oral delegate, a being whose kind had chronicled the rise and fall of civilizations for millennia, let out a soft musical hum. This was not merely victory. This was domination. A Growlnox warrior near the arena floor broke the silence with a thunderous snarl. He cheated. The brute, nearly as massive as Cortal had been, slammed a clawed fist against the stone wall. No mere human could best our general in honorable combat. Jack exhaled and turned fully. He rolled his neck, his voice carrying just enough steel to slice through the growing outrage. You think I cheated? His tone wasn't defensive. It was amused. Because I won? The Growlnox warrior bared his teeth. No human should be capable of... Jack tilted his head. Shouldn't be capable? Says who? He gestured to Cortal's lifeless body. Because your strongest warrior told you humans were weak, and you believed him. A low murmur rippled through the Growlnox ranks. Doubt! Jack stepped closer, letting them see the blood still seeping from his wound, the bruises forming beneath his skin. I fought with nothing but my hands, my training, and my mind. You expected me to stand still and trade blows with a creature twice my size. That's not strength. That's stupidity. He glanced toward the council. The galaxy likes to talk about war, about honor, but you don't understand what real war is. Not like we do. The Kreln delegate clicked his mandibles. And what, human, do you believe war to be? Jack's eyes were cold. War is adapting. War is outthinking your enemy before he even knows he's lost. War is doing whatever it takes to win, because losing means extinction. He looked directly at the Growlnox. You fight for sport. We fight to survive. The weight of his words sank into the chamber, pressing down like a gravity well. The Growlnox, so assured of their own superiority, now found themselves staring at something they hadn't accounted for, an opponent they couldn't simply overpower. A slow, deliberate sound broke the tension. Applause. Elias Graham clapped his hands together twice, then spread his arms. Well said, Lieutenant Commander. He turned to face the council, his expression measured but victorious. The terms were clear. One champion against another. No weapons. No interference. A fight to determine whether humanity had earned its place among the stars. He gestured to the arena floor. And yet, I see only one survivor standing. The implications were undeniable. The council had thrown down a challenge, fully expecting humanity to fail. Instead, they had watched a single human warrior dismantle one of the galaxy's strongest champions. Elias continued, Humanity does not ask for your approval. We do not beg for a seat at this table. We take our place, because we have earned it. Verkatha's expression twisted, but he had no argument left. The challenge had been issued, and the challenge had been met. The Council's rules had been followed, and by their own laws, Earth had won. After a long, agonizing silence, the Vrake leader exhaled sharply. Humanity is recognized as an equal member of the Galactic Council. The words sounded bitter in his mouth. The official ruling echoed through the chamber, transmitted across the galaxy, sent to every world that had been watching. on distant planets, human colonies would be celebrating, realizing what this meant. No longer outsiders, no longer a minor species to be ignored or exploited. Jack turned away, making his way toward the exit, his job complete. As he passed the remaining Growlnox warriors, he met their gazes. Some still burned with anger, others with confusion. But a few, just a few, held something new in their eyes. Respect. Jack didn't need applause. He didn't need fanfare. The galaxy had just learned what a seal was, and they would never forget it. The transmission of the duel spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, billions watched the footage, some in fascination, others in horror. The image of General Cortal's lifeless body, the once unshakable warlord defeated by a single human, became a symbol that no one could ignore. Humanity was no longer an afterthought, no longer a species to be dismissed with polite condescension or idle amusement. They had sent one warrior, and he had won. Jack Reynolds sat alone in the dimly lit barracks aboard the diplomatic vessel, his muscles aching, his side freshly patched with synthetic skin. The hum of the ship's engines was a steady pulse beneath his feet, a familiar rhythm. His body was still coming down from the fight, the adrenaline having left behind a dull, lingering exhaustion. But even in the solitude of his quarters, he knew he wasn't alone. The galaxy was watching now. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Elias Graham stepped inside, his suit immaculate despite the long negotiations that had followed the duel. The ambassador regarded Jack for a moment before exhaling, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You did it," Elias said, crossing his arms. "I don't think they've fully processed it yet." The Growlnox delegation left in silence. The rest of the council is still arguing over what this means. Jack smirked, leaning back in his chair. "It means they won't underestimate us again." Elias nodded. "No, they won't. But they're also afraid." He gestured vaguely. "Some of them think you're a genetic anomaly, a one-time phenomenon. Others are worried that if one human can do what you just did, what happens if more follow?" Jack's expression didn't change. "They should be worried." Elias chuckled. "You'd get along well with the Defense Council back on Earth. They're already working on the next phase. We have new trade offers, military agreements, alliances forming overnight. The Krell and the Oral are suddenly very interested in cooperation. Even the Drekhan, who once called us talking primates, are reconsidering our value." Jack wasn't surprised. Power respected power. That was a universal truth, whether on Earth or among the stars. Elias's smile faded slightly. "But this comes with consequences. The Growlnox will remember this. They've ruled through strength for centuries. You just proved they're not as invincible as they thought." Jack stretched his fingers, flexing the knuckles still bruised from the fight. "Let them come." Elias sighed. "I had a feeling you'd say that." He studied Jack for a long moment before shaking his head. "You know, history is going to remember you, whether you like it or not. You didn't just fight a duel. You changed the way humanity is seen. From now on, every negotiation, every alliance, every conflict, we're no longer the unknown species trying to prove ourselves." Jack met his gaze. "Now we're the ones they're afraid of." Elias nodded. "Exactly." Jack exhaled, leaning forward. "Good." The ambassador chuckled again, shaking his head as he made his way to the door. "Get some rest, Lieutenant Commander. I suspect you'll need it." As the door slid shut behind him, Jack sat in silence for a moment. The weight of what had happened, of what it meant for humanity's future, pressed against him. He had spent years fighting wars in the shadows, battles no one would ever know about. But this was different. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. Now the galaxy knew the truth, and they would never forget.